What's going on, people? It's Kid Shorty, Views and Vlogs, right? Today, we're going to talk about what Caribbean blacks need to know about the history of America, the history of the Federal Reserve, how the credit and debt system came to be, and how you can use it today to win. You understand? Now, remember to like, share, and subscribe to the video. You don't have to watch this whole video all at once. What you could do is you could take a break after every 10 minutes, come back, watch it again, watch it during your break time, watch it during your lunch time, watch it during when you have breaks in time and you digest some of the information. Second, remember to share this video out to people, because a lot of the game and value that I drop, it can be used, and you can go look it up for yourself. Remember, when I do these presentations, I'm teaching myself as well, because I had to go look up the information, study it, put the presentation together. So, and then I have ADHD, so I have to write the stuff down so I can read it back and remember it, right? So as I'm going through it, remember, I'm teaching y'all like I'm teaching myself. And I want you to actually absorb what I teach, or not absorb what I teach, absorb what I present to you, right? And a lot of stuff, what I do is I research the information and I teach myself and I bring it to you. And I say, man, maybe we can use this, right? I don't consider myself as a financial advisor. Let me put that there. I'm just researching what I see in the objective environment and say, oh man, this is interesting. Why haven't we been trying to do this? Or, I research history. Oh shit, this is what happened in history. So, that's where I'm coming at with it. And I want you to really watch my videos, digest the videos, learn from the videos, and teach yourself, and then go look up the information yourself. And, how can you bring it back to your communities? But especially for Caribbean Americans here, if we're going to be in America, we must learn about America, especially in 2025, to be successful in America and contribute to America. So let's get into it, right? My fault. There we go. So, Layer 1, Federal Reserve and Monetary Control, History and Purpose, 1933 Gold Seizure and Federal Reserve Centralization. FDR's Executive Order 6102 for citizens to turn in gold. Citizens receive $20 per pound or OZ in exchange, fixed by law. So when people say that people were tricked out of gold, no, they weren't tricked out of gold. It was an executive order for them to do so. All right. And we're going to go through what was the punishment of it if you didn't turn in your gold, right? Purpose: consolidate control over money supply and gold-backed dollar for citizens. Centralized monetary power. Federal Reserve System: hybrid public-private system with 12 regional banks, controlled partially by private banks, stockholders with dividends, and public board of governors. Primary role: manage monetary policy, credit creation, and stabilize the economy, right? These things are important, right? Now, the Federal Reserve is both public and private. And what happens is that the president, he nominates 7 people, I think 7 nominees. The Congress has to confirm those nominees. And then the senators is there, and they can grill those nominees. And the public, we can bring our concerns to our senators. The senators then grill those nominees. And then what happens is the Congress can reject a nominee or not elect it, or some saying. So there's a lot of checks and balances that go on with the Federal Reserve. They're not completely absent of government oversight, because they bow down to Congress, right? Congress has the power to change the Federal Reserve or do away with it or change something in it. And then Congress is held accountable by, I believe, the president, right? Because the president, he can veto something. Then the president he bows out to, like, it's a constant system of check and balances. And I'm going to go through that history too, right? Because there were a lot of misconceptions that I thought, based on hearing the conspiracy theory guys. And then when I looked at the objective information that was there, I said, oh shit, there's actually an accountability system in play for the Federal Reserve, right? Hybrid public-private systems with 12 regional banks, right? So I already read that. Controlled partly by private, so I already read that stuff, right? Viewed as a concentrated economic power among financial elites. Fed profit flows largely back to the Treasury, but the system favors large banks due to credit creation. Nationalization, state-owned, debated. Pros, full public control over money creation. Cons, political abuse, inflation risk, loss of investor confidence. So I added in there, what would happen if you nationalize that? See, now, if you nationalize the Federal Reserve, it would actually, and we're state-owned, it would actually make it communistic and Marxist in nature, which would be bad, right? Because if it's state-owned, they can print money and they can cause inflation in the long run, and you don't want that, especially if everybody trusts our dollar, right? The reason why everybody trusts the American dollar is because of A, the constitutional republic, B, the Federal Reserve is not controlled by politics. Understand? So political cannot sway the effectiveness of that dollar. You understand? And in another video, I'm going to break down the history of that, right? So that's why a lot of people trust the American dollar, as opposed to other countries, communist, Marxist countries, where it's the banking system in their country is state-backed or state-owned, and they can move around that dollar however it wants, especially if it's a corrupted dictator, right? You can't really trust that dollar. You might go broke investing into that Marxist economy, as opposed to now where we have a constitutional republic. It's executive branch, legislative branch, judicial branch, right? Things are put in checks and balances. The public people, we the public, we can vote or vote out a president or vote out our local governments. So there's plenty of checks and balances there, right? Things you can do as American citizens, especially if you're a migrant here and you're contributing to, you're an immigrant here, legal immigrant here, and you're contributing to the American space, right? There's things you can do to hold the government accountable. You understand? So, those old school conspiracy people, talking about how, oh, what the fuck happened to the, oh, shit, what the fuck happening? All right. I don't know what happened to my camera. But anyway, those old conspiracy cats talking about, the Fed and some conspiracy theory and this and that, which I was plagued by. And then until I go look up the information myself and go study it myself, I say, the system is actually perfect. It's actually good. And I think what happens is that they try to trick black people into doing stupid stuff or not to having faith into the government, so we don't hold the government accountable or speak out properly against these things that's happening. So these are things that we got aware of. Before we allow conspiracy theories to enter our brain, we should go actually study the objective information and study it for what it is before we formulate opinions. Make sure when we formulate opinions, it's based off of the facts, right? Summary: the Federal Reserve functions as a centralized monetary authority, creating money primarily through debt and credit. It's a hybrid system where private banks influence circulation, but ultimately policy is set by a semi-independent public board. Nationalizing it would remove private control, but introduce political risk, right? Federal Reserve notes, IOUs, and credit mechanics. What a Federal Reserve note is. A Federal Reserve note equals an IOU from the Fed backed by government faith and credit. Post 1933. So those of y'all saying that the Federal Reserve note is not backed by something, it's backed by something. Right? Post 1933, the dollar is fiat, not direct gold redemption for citizens. Money is a temporary purchasing power, not intrinsic wealth. Credit creation. Banks create credit via loans. Deposits credit, borrower can spend. Bank records a loan, debt is as an asset. Money exists temporarily as credit, disappears upon repayment. Fractional reserve banking amplifies this process, right? Debit versus credit. Debit, obligation to repay, liability. Credit, ability to spend borrowed money, asset temporarily in your hands. Credit turns into money while in use. Repaying principal destroys it. Interest survives as banking profit, right? So now, when you pay back a credit card, right, and you pay that credit card back, you pay interest. The interest becomes the profit. The banks takes that profit, they pay back the people that work for them, their employees, and they take that money and they turn it into more credit for you to borrow. So that's how they keep. So when you say the Federal Reserve note is not backed by anything, it's backed by something. Circular system. Borrow, spend, circulate, repay. Principal disappears, interest stays. System depends on continuous borrowing. Banks can use freed up balance from repayments to create a new credit. Summary. Modern money exists as layers of IOUs, with credit and debt intertwined. Credit is temporary money. Debt is the obligation behind it. Interest allows the system to retain some real money, while the principal created for borrowing is destroyed upon repayment. Right? But remember, the interest is there still, and that's what they get the profit from. All right. Now we're going to get into how you can use that to own stuff, right? So now if you want to take a break here, go get something to eat, come back. I know a lot of people have horrible attention spans, which is bad on y'all, because I know a lot of y'all don't have ADHD. I do, but I'm able to focus for long periods of time. Go take a break, pause the video, eat something, come back. You feel me? Or if you're at work, go back to work, come back. And you know what I'm saying? Continue the video. Layer 3, debt, credit, and community impact. Using credit versus asset. Credit is temporary. It does not confer true ownership. Assets, right? Let me read that properly. Credit is temporary. It does not confer true ownership. Assets, land, real estate, gold, business equal real wealth. Using credit to buy asset is possible, but bank liens may mean ownership is conditional until fully paid. So all you got to do is fully pay off your mortgage, fully pay off the car, and the physical car belongs to you because you paid it off, right? And a lot of you more Science Temple of America niggas gonna be like, you don't fully own the car. No. If you when you're paying, if you still owe the bank, if you still own the bank, right? Because what happened is now you are borrowing the debt to pay for the car, right? How should I explain this properly? How should I explain this properly? See, when you get when you get a car, right? Right? And you take out a loan to buy the car. The loan is the credit. The debt is what you owe for the car. Once you pay off the debt, the credit disappears. The credit disappears. But now the car itself belongs to you because you outright paid off for the car. And in the midst of that, you're building up your credit score. You're building up your credit score. You're showing that you're good at paying back your debts. You feel me? If I explained that properly, right? Over-reliance on credit without tangible assets makes communities vulnerable. Example, 2008 housing crash. Many people had homes via loans. Bubble burst. Homes worth less than mortgage. Debt remained. Assets effectively lost. Black communities historically impacted by limited asset ownership, entering debt-only financial systems, right? Repayment flow. Paying principal moves credit created, debt disappears. Paying interest, banks keeps as profit. Bank use profit or free balance to issue new credit, maintaining the cycle. Relying on credit without asset accumulation is risky. Debt repayment removes temporary money, leaving only asset and bank profit. True wealth comes from ownership, not borrowed purchasing power, right? Ownership, control, and systematic power. Who controls the system? Federal Reserve is not secretly owned by a few, but a hybrid of private banks, stockholders with dividends. I can be a stockholder. When you invest on Cash App, or you invest in Bitcoin, or you invest in Acorn, you can become a stockholder, right? Public oversight, Board of Governors, Congress. Centralized power creates perception of elite control, right? Why it feels controlled. Credit-based systems concentrate monetary power. Ordinary citizens are far removed from decision-making. Private banks wield influence because they create money via lending. Potential reform. True democratization of money equals public oversight. Asset-based reserve, transparency. Nationalized money can reduce private influence but risk political misuse, right? So, which is why I disagree with this part, right? I only put it there to see what it would look like if you tried to nationalize it or got the government involved into it. You know what I'm saying? I'd rather it be this way because you still can hold it accountable and it takes it away from the government insight on it, because what happens is you can have corrupted people in the head of government, like in a communist regime or socialist regime, and they can dictate that money. Similar to what Elon Musk was trying to propose, like you want to give you a set number of income, which I disagree with. I'd rather go out there as a wolf and fight for my food than somebody giving food to me and then dictating my process and my growth. Feel me? Summary. Control is concentrated, but it's structural rather than a secret conspiracy. The system is self-perpetuating because credit and debt circulate continuously. Wealth and power occur to those controlling credit creation, right? And earlier, I already told you how, governor, so public oversights, right? Private banks, stockholders with dividends, board of governors, Congress, right? So Congress, so it's not just centralized. It has a perception of it, but the Congress holds them accountable and the board of governors hold them accountable. You see what I'm saying? So it still has public oversight in it. Executive Order 11110, 1963, allowed Treasury to issue silverback notes, seen as a move to reduce dependence on federal created currency. Speculation exists that this contributed to opposition from financial powers, though no proof directly ties to his assassination. Right. Long-term impact: U.S. abandoned gold standard completely in 1971. Nixon. Fully fiat currency and debt-based credit system became entrenched. Summary: attempts to restore public-backed money, gold or silver, were curtailed. The modern system favors credit debt reliance, leaving real asset ownership essential for financial security, right? So this is the whole debate behind JFK and the gold standard, and I'm not going to go deep into that because that's not what this video is about. You feel me? I think they did release some public records on it. I think Mr. Trump did. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But this is what speculated why he got, deleted, right? I don't know how this would have looked. Right. The more things, rather than fight a system that has more power than you, just adapt to it to get power, right? Definition: the temporary purchasing power you get when a bank or lender gives you money you don't yet own. Mechanics: when a bank loans you $1,000, it creates a credit deposit in your account. That $1,000 can be spent immediately. It's created as real money while it circulates, but exists because you owe it back. Relationship to debt: credit is the asset you temporarily hold. Debt is the obligation tied to it, right? The obligation to repay borrowed money. Mechanics: your $1,000 loan equals $1,000 debt plus interest. Debt exists until you repay it fully. Repaying the principal removes the created money from circulation. Definition: the extra money paid to the lender for the privilege of borrowing. Mechanics: when you pay back $1,000 loan at 5% interest, $1,000 goes to principal, destroyed. $50 goes to the bank, profit. Interest is how the bank earns real money from lending. Only interest remains in circulation after principal is repaid. The bank can spend it, invest it, or create new credit based on it, which is what banks do all the time, right? Definition: money the bank keeps after a loan is repaid. Most of the interest. Mechanics: profit equals interest collected on loans. Can be used for paying employees, paying dividends to shareholders, creating new loans, new credit. Key insight: banks don't make money from principal. They make money from interest, which stays in circulation as real value that can be redeployed, right? Definition: tangible or intrinsic. Value that exists independent of debt or credit. Examples: gold, silver, or other precious metals. Land, real estate fully owned in cash. Business or productive assets that generate real goods or service. Contrast with credit. Credit is temporary and disappears when debt is repaid. Real money retains value independently and is not destroyed by repayment, right? Key insight: real money equals ownership and intrinsic value, not just a ledger entry or bank IOU. When the system says you have $1,000, that is temporarily real only because the system trusts that debt exists. The underlying asset is only real if it's backed by something tangible. So I guess like a car, maybe, iPhone, like some of y'all do Android payments, right? What creates new credit based on it means, right? When a bank earns interest or receives repayment on loan, principal repayment. There were dollars and you borrowed is destroyed. It no longer exists as newly created money. Interest. Suppose you pay $50 in interest. The money now belongs to the bank. It's real money for them. Now the bank has profit and freed up. Oh, hold on. Okay, my bad. Has profit. The bank has profit and freed up balance on its books. That allows them to lend to someone else. They can create a new loan credit of, say, $1,000 for another borrower. This new loan generates new deposits in the borrower's bank. New money enters circulation. Repeat the cycle. The borrower spends the money, it circulates, eventually repaid. Interest again, becomes bank profit, bank can loan again. So let me put that again. The borrower spends the money, it circulates, eventually repaid, interest again, becomes bank profit, bank can lend again. So this is interesting. Most money circulation today is created through loans/credit, not printed cash. If banks stop issuing new loans, money supply would contract because repaying loans destroy principal. Economy could slow or shrink because less money is available to spend. This is why banks are incentivized to continuously create new credit, using interest profits and repay principal as the foundation. So they got to keep creating credit and lending it so you can borrow it so you can spend it. So there's a continuous system, right? Bank issues $1,000 loans, creates credit in borrower account. Borrowers spend $1,000. Money circulates in the economy. Borrower pays $1,000 principal plus $50 interest. $1,000 principal disappears. $50 interest equals bank profit. Bank can now issue another $1,000 loan using freed up balance from repayment. Confidence that new borrower can pay interest. Result: the cycle repeats, creating more credit, temporary money, while keeping the system running. So if out here at this moment, you want to go take a break, go eat something, come back, go do your work, go do your business, come back later to the side of the video and continue. Think of it like revolving holes of water. The water equals money. You borrow water, use it, and pour it back. Principal repayment. A small drop stays in the bucket, interest. You can now lend the drop to the next person. The system keeps circulating water as long as you keep borrowing and repaying. Banks don't just hold money. They actively create it via loans. Repay loans plus interest give them the ability to generate new credit, which fuels the economy. Without this continuous cycle, the money supply would shrink and the system could stall, right? Banks just don't hold money. They actively create it via loans. Repay loans plus interest give them the ability to generate new credit, which fuels the economy. Without this continuous cycle, the money supply would shrink and the system could stall. Layer credit and debt mechanics. Credit creation borrowing. Definition. Credit is temporary money created by a bank when it issues a loan process. Borrower requests a loan. Example, $1,000. Bank's credit borrower's account with $1,000. At this point, the borrower can spend the money. The borrower now has a debt obligation of $1,000 plus interest. Bank records a loan as an asset on its books. IOU from borrower. Key points. Credit gives the borrower temporary purchasing power. Debt equals the borrower's obligation to repay. Principal is newly created money, not taken from existing deposits, right? Spending and circulation. Definition. Once credit is used, it enters the economy and circulates process. Borrowers spend $1,000, example, buying goods or paying services. Recipients deposit the $1,000 in their bank account. Now the money is circulating and can be lent or spent again. Key points. Credits functions as money in motion. Even though it originated as a loan, the economy treats it like real money while it circulates. Debt repayment. Paying back the loan reduces debt and affects the money supply. Process. By the way, those of you talking about trying to destroy America, you're a dumbass. I don't know why you got Negroes in certain organizations or groups that want that to happen. You go right back to the hunter-gatherer stage where everybody was a savage. I don't understand. Like, what? Now that black people, and this is for Caribbean blacks and black Americans, now that we're in a space of monetary freedom and we can actually gain access to the system and use it to real power and wealth. Now you got niggas that want to destroy it now. Where's he gonna go back to Africa with them motherfuckers over there? Where? Some communist country in Europe? Come on. Cut the bullshit. Borrowers repays $1,000 principals plus $50 interest. Principal repayment. The original $1,000 credit is destroyed in the system. Debt disappears from the borrower's balance. Interest repayment. $50 become bank profit. This remains in circulation and can fund new loans. Key points. Principal repayment removes money from the system. Interest is real money that stays with the bank. The system depends on continuous lending to maintain money supply. So even if you pay off your debts and the credit destroys, the bank used the interest that they got from you paying off the debt as more credit to loan to people. So it's always gonna be there. So you don't got to worry about it. Pay off your debt, own your phone outright, or own what? What I got it here. Yeah, own out your phone outright. Pay off your debt. Yeah, pay off your debt and you should be good, right? Bank profit and new credit creation. Banks use interest and repay principal to issue new credit. Banks keep interest as profit. Freed up balance from principal repayment allows bank to issue a new loan. This new loan creates new credit, which enters circulation when spent. Key points. The economy is self-perpetuating as long as banks keep lending. Credit creation equals temporary money. Debt repayment plus interest equals sustainability mechanism for the system. Interaction with real money. Real money equals asset with intrinsic value independent of credit. Credit allows temporary access to money, but without assets, it disappears upon repayment. Real money includes land or real estate, fully owned cash, gold, silver, commodities, business, or productive assets. Like this. Right? It's like this, right? Like the phone. Like my Xbox. You know what I'm saying? What I did is I used a Citizens Bank to pay for my Xbox Series X, and I paid it off after 3 years. And because I did that, I built up my credit score to like 700. So anyway, ownership of real assets provide long-term security outside the credit system, right? Key points. Credit is temporary purchasing power. Repayment destroys it. Real money equals permanent value independent of debt cycles. Asset accumulation is critical to avoid vulnerability in a debt-based economy, right? So temporary purchasing power, right? Credit created, borrower receives temporary money, incurs debt. Spending in circulation, money moves through the economy. Debt repayment, principal disappears, interest remains. Bank profit, a new credit, interest retained, new loans issued. Asset ownership, true wealth independent of a credit system. Insight. The modern monetary system is essentially a flow of credit and debt continuously created and destroyed. With interest and real assets as anchors of value, without continuous lending, the system contracts showing how dependent the economy is on credit cycles. Credit card example, right? Credit issue. Scenario, bank gives you a credit card with $500 limit. What it means, you've owed $500 of available credit. You don't owe this money, but the bank allows you to use it. Terms, this is your credit, temporary purchasing power. The bank assumes you will repay it whatever you spend plus interest if applicable. Available credit equals $500. Debt equals zero, right? Scenario, you spend $200, or I spent $700 on my Xbox. What happens? That $200 is borrowed from the bank. It is now your debt. Your available credit decreases by the amount spent. $500 minus $200 equals $300 credit remaining. Available credit, $500 minus $200 equals $300. Now, what you owe is the $200, right? Spending credit transform into debt. You now owe the bank $200. You pay the $200 back to the bank. What happens? The $200 debt is cleared. Your available credit is restored to $500. And the interest you paid, if applicable, becomes bank profit. Debt equals $200 minus $200 equals zero. Available credit, $300 plus $200 equals $500. Bank profit if it equals interest if charged, right? Credit is restored after repayment. The flow is credit, debt, repayment, restored credit. This is how revolving credit works. You can reuse the same credit line repeatedly. Credit issue. Banks allow you to spend up to $500 limit. Spending. Credit used becomes debt, $200. Repayment, debt disappears, credit is restored. And once the bank sees that you repeatedly pay back off your debts, they increase your spending limit. All right. Formula representation. Credit available, spend, debt created, repay, credit restored. Now, I used to stay away from credit cards because of black culture, right? How black culture teaches you that you can't trust credit, you need physical cash. And I think it's a justifiable fear, because when you come from, we look at the 2008 housing crash, and we're going to go through it here, and debt a little bit later. And this is really America's fault, right? Why America's fault? Because you taught black people to not have faith in the system. Then they don't use it. Now they don't want to use it. And then what's taught to everybody else is not to use it. And instead of learning about it, and then, it's just crazy. Credit versus debt. Spending available credit, transform it into a debt obligation. Restoration. Once debt is repaid, the system restores your credit line. The money is effectively recycled. Bank profit. Banks earn money from interest, fees, and late charge. System cycle, revolving credit. Now, this is not me giving financial advice, right? I would say how I had to do it. Make sure that you have a steady flow of income or cash flow, right? So you got to have a stable job. And then before you use your credit to buy something else, this is not financial advice. This is something I've done through experience, right? Like, for example, the laptop I'm using, I use credit to buy it. And I use credit to buy my Xbox and my TV. How I did it is that I didn't buy all those things at once. I bought my Xbox first. After I paid off that debt, right? Then I rested for a little bit. I built up my money. Then I bought my TV. Then I paid off that debt. Then I rested for a bit. Then I let my cash flow build up. And then I paid for my laptop that I have. Right? I'm not going to purchase anything with my credit again until I pay off my laptop, and I'll build my credit like that. So that's how you can outright own things. Even my computer table, I did it for that. Right? So you can own your stuff, use credit based upon your income or your budgeted income, and buy things little by little, not all at once. That way, you're not owning you don't owe too many people stuff, right? You don't owe too many companies things, and it's not compounding, and it's not overtaking you, right? So you buy a little at a time. You buy the items a little bit at a time, right? You don't buy everything at once. That's just my experience. It's not financial advice. I'm not giving you financial advice. I'm just saying how I did it to own stuff, right? System cycle. Revolving credit not show the circular nature of credit creation, debt repayment, and recrediting, right? Analogy for clarity. Credit equals a $500 loan from a friend. Spending equals borrowing $200 from the friend. Debt, you owe the friend $200. Repayment, you return $200. Your ability to borrow again is restored. Interest, your friend keeps $5 as a fee for letting you borrow, right? The heart of how the banking system self-perpetuates through credit and interest, right? I think I broke this down. Becomes bank profit. $5 is now real money. Can use, not dependent on a new debt. Banks don't just hold money. They can issue new loans or credit because repay principal frees up capacity on their balance sheets. Profit interest adds to the bank available funds, right? You repay $200 credit. Bank now has $200 back in balance plus $5 interest. Banks can issue 200 or more leveraging fractional reserve rules to someone else as a new loan, right? The new borrower spends the money circulates, eventually the borrower repays, principal is destroyed, interest remains. Cycle repeats indefinitely as a long borrowing and repayment continue. Credit creation is temporary, only exists while debt exists. Interest becomes permanent bank profit, used to issue new loans, pay expenses, or invest. The economy runs on this flow. Money is constantly created, spent, repaid, and recreated. Revolving credit lines. Like credit cards are a small-scale version of the small principal, right? Credit issue. Borrower can spend. Borrower spend, credit becomes debt. Debt repaid, principal disappears, interest remains. Bank use interest and freed balance issues new credit. Cycle repeats. Imagine a water wheel. Water equals credit money. You use water to turn the wheel, spend it. When water drains, repayment, the wheel stops partially. Banks keep a small bucket, interest, uses it to start spending. Another wheel, new credit. System keeps moving as long as water flows, right? So you need a flow of income, of money to earn, go to work, get a job. You can build your asset that way. You can own stuff that way. You know what I'm saying? Layer 3, credit, assets, and systematic impact. Using credit versus owning assets. Temporary money borrowed from banks exists only as long as you have debt obligation. Does not give true ownership over anything you buy with it until debt is repaid. Tangible items of value, what you fully own. Land, real estate, paid in cash, gold, silver, commodities, businesses or income-generating assets. Return value independent of the banking system. Key insight. Relying solely on the credit equals dependent on the system. Real wealth comes from assets that exist independently of credit cycles. All right. Using credit to acquire assets. You take loan or use credit to buy property. Conditional ownership. Banks hold a lien until the loan is fully paid. Risk. If you default, bank can seize the asset, which is what happened in 2008 with the housing crash, right? Example. Mortgage. You live in a house, but technically the bank owns it until fully paid. Key insight. Credit can be leveraged to build asset, but it creates exposure to risk. True independence equals acquiring asset outright or generating cash to pay off loans quickly. Right? I'm not going to go into the science of that, because there's a way you can do that. I'm not going to say what it is on here. Create vulnerability to financial crisis. 2008 housing crash. Many people were asset rich on paper, but debt heavy. So when values drop, debt remained. Lack of real asset ownership in communities. Example, historically black communities were denied property and wealth accumulation, entering credit-only systems, made them vulnerable to systematic collapse. Circular debt risk. Borrow, spend, repay, reborrow. Relies on continuous inflow of new credit. Any disruption in lending or repayment can contract the system, creating financial instability. Key insight. The credit system is stable only if lending and repayment continue uninterrupted. Communities without asset are exposed to systematic collapse. Repayment flow and role of interest. Principal repayment destroys temporary money from the system. Interest stays with the bank, used to issue new credit or invest. Effect, interest profits circulate, but principal disappears. Debt cycles must continue to sustain money supply. Key insight, people relying solely on credit never build lasting wealth. Asset accumulation is the anchor that protects against economic cycles. And there's a way that Caribbean black culture used to do things and black American culture used to do things. And we're going to go into what that is. It's called the partner system or Roscoe system. Right? Strategies for building real wealth. Prioritize assets first, acquire tangible income generating assets, pay off debt quickly if credit is used. Use credit strategically, only for purchasing that create value. Business, investment, property. Avoid using credit for depreciating items, cars, electronics. Like Vic Rhymes told you, guns and butter, right? Leverage interest to create new credit responsibility. Understand that banks profit off your interest, but you can also leverage credit to multiply wealth when done wisely. Key takeaways. The modern credit system is circular and self-reinforcing, but fragile. Debt-only participation equals exposure to systematic collapse. Real wealth equals assets plus strategic use of credit. Understanding this distinction is critical to protecting financial independence and educating communities, right? Scenario, black community uses credit to buy businesses, right? Initial credit use, community gets loans from a bank to buy, laundromat, grocery store, restaurant, mechanics. The banks credit their accounts with loan amounts. At this point, the credit exists as money they can spend, but it's temporary. It is tied to the debt obligation. Key point, credit is not ownership yet. It's temporary purchasing power. Debt equals obligation to repay the bank. Payment of credit debt repayment. Over 5 years, they repay the principal plus interest. Mechanics of repayment. Principal repayment, credit is destroyed, interest becomes bank profit. Key point. Once the principal is fully repaid, the original credit no longer exists in the system. This is normal. Credit only exists while the debt exists. Right? Ownership of assets. After repayment, the businesses are fully owned by the community. Why? The bank no longer has a lien or claim because debt is cleared. The money used to buy the business comes from credit, but repayment extinguishes the loan obligation. The underlying asset, the business, now exists independently of the original credit. So you outright, after you pay off the debt, for you pro-blickety blacks out there, after you pay off the debt, right, you own the property outright. Permanent purchasing power or permanent power. Right? The credit used to purchase the business does not persist after repayment. Ownership of the asset is now real wealth, independent of the bank. I wish I knew this shit in my 20s. I swear to God. That pro-blickety black space, because a lot of it is Marxist in nature, that has set back black culture 1,000 years or 400 years. Anybody that subscribes to it, because it's Marxist in nature. It's feminist in nature. And what they want y'all to do as black people is to regress back to hunter-gatherer stages where you were fucking savages. And you're not going to progress anywhere. So this is message to Caribbean blacks. Do not follow pro-blickety blacks in Black America or the Marxist communist model, because that's going to regress you back to the hunter-gatherer stages where you were savages and shit. You want to move forward by using the system that's there before you to purchase actual wealth and power in your communities. That's how you do that. And it has to be patriarchal, and it has to be capitalist. Does the bank still owe anything? No. Once the loan is repaid, the bank has received full principal interest. Principal interest. What's going on up there? Anyway, my cat's messing about. The bank does not owe the community anything because the credit is gone. Right? The only thing that remains is the asset they now fully own: laundromat, grocery, restaurant. Credit equals borrowed shovel to dig a well. Use a shovel to dig a water source. Business, after digging, you return the shovel, repay the loan. The well still exists. It's real, independent value. The shovel credit is gone, but the well asset remains. So now that well is a continuous, because everybody wants to drink from your well. And then when it rains, it gives the well water. So that's so that business, the business that you use to people, where people come and purchase stuff from, is the well. But now, since you use the money that you generated to pay off the loan to the bank, you now outright own the asset of the well. And then you build up your credit score with the bank, and the bank says, shit, you paid off one business with this. You know, we're going to increase your credit limit, and you can borrow from the bank to buy another business and then pay off that and own that. Caribbean blacks, we got to learn how to use the shit, man. Credit is temporary, asset or permanent. Using credit wisely allows creation of real wealth. Repayment extinguishes the original money. This is how the system maintains balance. Interest is the cost of using credit. The bank earns profit, but the borrowers now have independent assets. True wealth comes from ownership. Once the debt is cleared, you retain real assets, not temporary money. Right? Structured flow. Credit issue. Community receives the loan. Credit spent. Buys business. Debt obligation. Debt repaid. Principal destroyed. Interest goes to the bank. Credit no longer exists. The business fully owned. Real money, well, now independent of bank. Now, you could do this if a group got together and say they purchased a something in your community that's going to be useful. A grocery store, a laundromat, a farmer's market, or something. You purchase that, and everybody get together, and you pay off that grocery store or that laundromat. Now that asset belongs to the community. Now, instead of you needing Mr. Chin to have a laundromat open in your store, you have your own laundromat opened up in your own community. But I don't know, for whatever reason, between Caribbean blacks and Black Americans, there's something fucking wrong with us. There's something cracked about our brain and mentality. I don't know what it is that we can't. I don't understand why we can't do that. Why can't Caribbean blacks get together, put their money together, purchase something, pay it off, own it outright, get our own corner store or something, and then protect the asset. And guess what? Take out that no snitching rule. So in the event when a gangster nigga or some gang banging knuckleheads come destroy your store, snitch on all them niggas and send them to jail and prison. Credit is just a tool to access money temporarily. Asset purchase with credit can become permanent wealth once the debt is fully repaid. The bank profits from interest, but the ownership and value of the asset belongs to the buyer, not the lender, right? Temporary ownership explained. Temporary ownership occurs when you control or use the asset or resource but you do not fully own it legally because it is tied to debt or a lien. You can use it and benefit from it, but the bank or lender still has a claim on it until you repay what you owe. Until debt is cleared, your ownership is conditional, not absolute. Key characteristics of temporary ownership: conditional access. You can use the asset, but the lender retains legal rights until repayment. Risk of repossession. If debt is not repaid, the lender can take back the asset. No real wealth creation yet. Using credit or loans to acquire something temporarily does not yet build true wealth. Becomes, okay, my bad. Let me read it properly. Becomes real ownership upon full repayment. Once debt is cleared, all control and rights transfer fully to you. Temporary ownership is like borrowing a friend's house to live in while promising to pay rent. You get the benefits of living there, but if you stop paying, your friend can take the house back. Only when you fully pay or buy the house do you own it outright. Connection to credit and debt. Credit allows temporary access to purchasing power. Spending credit gives you temporary ownership over goods or assets. Debt equal the obligation that makes your ownership temporary. Repayment principle disappears, ownership becomes permanent, true wealth is realized, right? Temporary ownership equals control without fully legal claim. Tied to repayment obligations, real wealth equals ownership independent of credit or debt. Credit, temporary ownership, permanent ownership, step by step. So Caribbean blacks, we got to purge ourselves from the ignorant Caribbean Negroes. We got to purge ourselves from that. We got to get intelligent and smart about how we move. Because I know what I'm thinking. Every time you try to bring this to Caribbean black people, there's always some ignorant Negroes in there that's going to say this don't work. But it can work. And about Babylon this, European colonial master that. Nigga. And back to Africa this. I ain't trying to go back to no Africa, nigga. Scenario: black community receives bank loans to buy laundromat, grocery store, restaurants. Mechanics: banks credit accounts with loan amount, $500,000 total. Credit exists only temporarily tied to debt obligation. Community can control business and operate them, but the bank legally owns them until debt is repaid. Key insight: credit gives control without true ownership. The community benefits from operation, but is at risk if repayment fails. This is why black culture cannot own anything, because we want to now go to a black business and we want to pay half for that shit. We don't want to pay the full price of the thing to the We don't want to pay full price of the black owner or the Caribbean black owner who owns that store, because we would expect the Caribbean black owner to give us half price. But they're not going to be able to pay back the debt belonging to the bank so they can own that outright. We don't want to do that. That mentality has to be erased, and then we from our mindset. And then when that Caribbean black goes open up a business in um what's it called in Manhattan again? 42nd Street. All of a sudden, my fault. The long guy decides to blow the damn thing at my window. Anyway, if a Caribbean black person or black American person decides to open up a business in Saks and Fifth Avenue or one of those highly expensive places in Manhattan, because they understand that they're going to get more business and profit from that area, and they don't open it up in the black community because they know that niggas is either going to destroy it or not pay for it, or want you to pay half-ass. Niggas get mad. And then they get mad when Punjabi farmers market or Pakistani laundromat or Zhu Quenche laundromat opens up in your neighborhood and make profit off of you because you're willing to pay full price to Mr. Chin or Chun Li, but you won't pay full price to Donovan or to Tyrone. That's the core problem. This is the core problem. All right, temporary ownership. Community controls the business. Right. So key insight: credit gives control without true ownership. The community benefits from the operation, but is at risk of repayment if repayment fails. Spending credit to acquire assets. Scenario: community uses the credit to pay the sellers of the business. Mechanics: money flow from the bank. Sellers' assets transfer partially. Debt obligation remains. Community now owes the bank the full account borrowed plus interest. You mean to tell me that you can't have? So you have a Caribbean restaurant, a Black American soul food restaurant, and say you have three of them opening up on one block. Say 1 week you spend some money at the Caribbean nigga restaurant. The next week you spend some money at the Black American restaurant. The next week you spend money at another restaurant. And now you're spending money at different places, helping them grow their business. You can do that. Right? Money flows from banks, sellers, assets transfer partially. Debt obligation remains. Community now owes the bank the full amount borrowed plus interest. Ownership status still temporary. The community can operate and profit from the business. Bank retains legal claim until debt is fully repaid. Key insight: using credit allows strategic access to assets, but ownership is conditional. Right. Give me 1 second. Repayment begins. Scenario: community pays back 100,000 per year over 5 years. Mechanics: oh, you pay it back. You pay it. You can pay. Say if you had one business and you pay back off that debt $300,000, right, for 1 year, or say 150 for 1 year, or you pay 150 each year. You can pay off the debt before the 5 years comes, right? Principal repayment reduces debt. Interest paid equal to bank. Ownership status, gradual transition. As debt decreases, community claim strengthens. Still technically temporary ownership until debt equals zero. Key insight: repayment equals progress towards permanent ownership. Interest is the cost of using temporary ownership. Many tell me that in Jamaica, y'all can't use this. But the problem is in Jamaica, it's a whole bunch of Negroes and niggas and brown skinned niggas. And you know what? Scenario: after 5 years, all principal plus interest has been paid. Mechanics: principal equals $500,000, disappears from the system. Interest equals $50,000, stays with the bank as profit. Asset status: business are now fully owned by the community. Ownership status: permanent ownership, real wealth. Community now controls the laundromat, grocery store, and the restaurant outright. No bank liens exist. They retain full profit and control. Key insight: temporary ownership has converted into real independent wealth. Original credit no longer exists. It was a tool to acquire assets, not wealth itself. But in my scenario, Caribbean blacks, that's how we can support each other, right? Say Donovan, he opens up a restaurant next door. Say Trevor, he opens up a health shop down the block. Say Michelle, she opened up a Golden Crust. Say next month, open up a roti shop. And every week, we just pay, every week, we eat somewhere here. What's 1 week? Next week, we eat somewhere here. Next week, we eat somewhere else. And we keep our money rotating instead of spending it on McDonald's and Burger King. Temporary ownership equals control plus risk. You can benefit from the asset, but the bank can reclaim it if repayment fails. Credit is a tool, not a wealth. Spending credit does not create permanent value. Repayment converts temporary ownership into real wealth. The assets now exist independent of the bank or the credit system. Interest equals cost of access and temporary ownership. Bank profits, community gains, long-term assets, right? Temporary ownership is like renting a house while promising to pay the full purchasing price over time. You'll live there, earn from it, but the landlord bank can reclaim it if repayment stops. After paying in full, you own the house outright. The temporary arrangement is gone. The real wealth is now yours. Credit allows communities to access asset, but before they have full wealth, the conversion from temporary to permanent ownership is what creates true lasting wealth. Understanding this cycle is key to financial literacy and teaching strategic use of credit. All right. I think this is the. I think they already explained this part already. Y'all can pause this and read it for yourself. But let me read the last part. Inside, other communities, Jewish, Chinese, European, historically use controlled credit systems to circulate money internally and grow wealth collectively. Right? Establishing a bank, community bank, or credit union fully owned by Black community or Caribbean Black community. Issue credit internally to community members to start business, buy real estate or fund education. Interest and repayment stay within the community, profit reinvested locally. Using the system to build assets, business community members take loans to open laundromats, grocery stores, restaurants, profit go to owners, taxes and reinvestment stay local. Buy rental properties, collect rent, create passive income streams, education and skills. Credit can fund training, apprenticeship, or technical schools. Increase earning potential. Key insight: credit acts as a lever to acquire real assets. Debt is temporary. Assets remain permanent after repayment. Internal circulation keeps money within the community rather than flowing outward to external banks. Example: flow in the community. Community bank issues 1 million credit. Entrepreneurs start 5 small businesses. Business operate for 5 years. Owners generate revenue, repay debt plus interest. Credit extinguished after repayment. Business fully owned. Interest paid stays in community bank, can fund next generation of loans. Cycle repeats: sustainable, compound wealth internally. Outcome: community gains permanent assets, money is recirculated internally. Strengthening economic independence creates a self-sufficient ecosystem similar to historically successful community systems. Credit is a tool, not a trap. Can create real wealth if ownership is transferred from temporary to permanent. Interest stays local, avoids losing money to external institutions. Reinvestment is key. Profits from interest in business must be reinvested to fund new loans and growth. Collective strategy beats individual debt. Shared risk and internal circulation multiplies impact, right? Imagine a black community creating its own water system. Water flowing temporarily to individual homes, debt, the obligation to return water to the system, interest. Small portion returning to maintain and expand the system. Permanent assets equals wells, reservoirs, irrigation systems, and continue benefiting everyone even after water has been cycled. By creating, now remember, this is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just saying what is there, what objectively is there. By creating their own banking and credit system, the community can use the same financial tools that external institutions use to accumulate wealth. Temporary credit is leveraged to acquire permanent assets. Reinvestment and internal circulation allow sustainable compound economic growth. Banks owned by individual groups, shareholders, families, private corporations issue credit and collect interest as profit. Decisions are made to maximize profits for owners, not necessarily the public. Examples: Federal Reserve member banks, major commercial banks, public nationalized banks. So this is what happens. So we're going into what would happen if you nationalize a banks, right? Owner controlled by the state government. Policy decisions may prioritize economic stability, public welfare, or national strategy. Credit creation can be directed to public programs, infrastructure, or national development. Key insight: most of the modern global system is privately controlled, giving a small group of individuals the ability to influence money supply, credit availability, and interest rates. Only banks can create credit that circulates in the economy. Individuals and business must borrow from the banks to access temporary money. Interest extraction: credit costs money. Interest becomes a steady profit stream for private banks. Systemic influence: banks influence who gets loans, who interest rates are, what industry or communities are prioritized. Wealth and economic power are concentrated in the hands of those controlling credit creations. Communities without access to credit or banking control are vulnerable to exploitation and stagnation. Right? So you can pause the video. I think I already run through this, right? Private bank interests can lobby governments, influence tax policy, regulation of credit distributions, create structural advantage for certain groups, disadvantage for others, right? So that's one of the flaws. But the public, you can lobby the government back. Right? Communities must pay interest to banks outside the community. Money leaves the local economy, weakens internal growth. Credit-dependent economies are fragile. Disruption, recession, bank failures, assets may be repossessed, and wealth disappears. So, internal banking system. Issue credit internally. Interest stays within the community. Control who receives loans. Prioritize asset building. Asset bank lending. Loans only issued against tangible productive assets. Reduce risk of default. Strengthens the community financial base. Reinvestment cycle. Interest repaid. Principal fund new loans. Perpetuate internal growth. Builds long-term economic independence. Education oversight. Right. Education oversight. Teach community members about credit, interest, and ownership. Prevent misuse of credit. Preserve temporary ownership until permanent assets are required. Right. In the current system, private banks control the taps of money flow. Communities without access, water flows out to others. Communities with control, water credit circulates internally, creating independent irrigation systems that grow sustainable wealth. Key takeaways: private equals control, concentration of wealth. Only those controlling credit can dictate economic outcomes. Communities can replicate the system internally. Community banks and internal credit cycles allow self-determination. That's what was Black Wall Street in a lot of those black towns, right? Interest is a tool. Externally, drains resources from communities. Internally, funds growth and reinvestment, which is what happened into Black culture, right? Because we don't have any privately owned banks, and we spend our money, and we what's it called, borrow money from external banks. Those that our money goes elsewhere. It's not doesn't stay in the community, right? And if you can't teach Black people, or Black people don't want to get taught on how to spend within their own and respect each other and love each other and support each other's businesses, it's never going to grow beyond what it is, right? Knowledge plus strategy equals empowerment. Understanding the flow of credit, debt, and temporary ownership allows communities to navigate and benefit from the system rather than be exploited by it, right? And you can also lobby the government if you have power within your community. Now the government now can't just benefit one group over the other. They got to come up with a balanced proposition to benefit everybody, right? Modern banking is disguised to concentrate power and wealth. By building internal credit systems, circulating money internally, and investing in real assets, communities can get independent, sustainable wealth, and resilience. The lesson from other historical successful communities, Jewish, Chinese, European, can be applied to empower Black communities strategically, right? Especially Caribbean Black communities. So the Fed has 12 regional banks. These banks are owned by private members in their districts. Private banks hold stock in their regional Fed banks, which gives them dividends and some governance input, but does not give them full control over monetary policy. Public components. The Board of Governors in Washington, D.C. is a federal agency. Its 7 members are appointed by the President and confirmed by the Senate. This board sets policy for the entire Fed system, including interest rates, reserve requirements, and supervisions of banks. The Fed is legally accountable to Congress, which oversees its operations. Accountability mechanism. Even though private banks own the regional Feds, the system is heavily regulated and accountable through multiple channels. Congressional oversight. Congress can hold hearings, request reports, and audit the Fed activities. The Fed must submit an annual report to Congress and testify on monetary policy. Executive oversight. The president's so Congress, I believe, is the judicial branch. The president is the executive branch. I could be mistaken, right? The president appoints the boards of governors, 7 members with Senate confirmation. This gives the executive branch indirect influence over Fed policy. Legal framework. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 established the purpose, powers, and limits of the Fed. It is legally mandated to pursue maximum employment, stable prices, inflation control, moderate long-term interest rates, audit and reporting. The Fed is subject to annual audits by the Government Accountable Office, GAO, for specific areas, not all policy decisions. Monetary policy decisions like setting interest rates are independent to avoid political manipulation, but financial management and operations are auditable. Shit. If Tommy's watching this, he would say English is whooping my ass right now. So let's go. Designed to balance private sector expertise with public oversight. Private banks bring knowledge and operational experience. Public oversight ensures alignment with national economic goals. Independence in monetary policy is intentional, to prevent short-term political influence from destabilizing the economy. Nationalizing the Fed. If the Fed were fully nationalized, all regional banks would be owned by the federal government. Policy could be directly controlled by the president and Congress. Advantages: greater democratic control over money supply, potentially more alignment with public priorities like targeted lending to communities or infrastructure. Risk: political interference could destabilize monetary policy, inflation, recessions, potentially slower response because decision might be bureaucratic. Loss of private expertise that help run day-to-day operations. So you don't want it to be nationalized, right? The Constitution does not explicitly mention the Federal Reserve because it was created in 1913, long after the Constitution. Accountability comes indirectly through Congress' power of purpose, Article 1, Section 8. Congress can regulate financial institutions. Presidential appointment power. Board of Governors is nominated by the president. Statutory law. Federal Reserve Act legally binds the Fed to specific duties and reporting. Key insight. The Fed's independence is monetary policy, is designed, but is still under law and ultimately accountable to Congress and the executive branch. Private ownership does not give the banks unlimited power. It mainly provides structural capital and operational input. The Fed is accountable under the law and Constitution indirectly via Congress, presidential appointments, and the Federal Reserve Act. Private regional ownership provides operational input but does not override public oversight. Nationalizing the Fed would shift control directly to the government, increasing political influence but reducing private expertise. So you don't want it to be nationalized. You want to keep it right where it is, right? Right? And this is all, if you nationalize it, this is going to set it up into a Marxist flow. You don't want that. All right? So, analogy, credit equals water in cities' pipes. Hybrid system, private operators, public regulators, efficient flow, oversight. Fully nationalized system, government controls all pipes. Water may be misdirected, rationed, or politicized, which is what Captain America's argument was. That's what Captain America's argument was, right? In Captain America Civil War. That's what his argument was with the, what was it called? The Slovakian Accords or something like that. That's what his argument was. Congressional oversight. Congress audits, requires reports, and can summon the Fed to testify. Board of Governors appointed by President plus confirmed by State Senate direct accountability to the public through political institutions. Legal limitations. The Fed operates under the Federal Reserve Act, legally bound to pursue specific goals. Maximum employment, stable prices, and moderate interest rates, right? Operational independence. Prevents short-term political manipulation while still allowing oversight. A balance between efficiency, accountability, and public interest. Key insight. Hybrid Fed equal accountability plus efficiency plus independent monetary policy. Nationalized Fed equal potential political control, risk of central planning, inefficiency, and drift toward Marxist style control. And you don't want the nationalized part. Right? Current system, private versus public hybrid. Accountable via law. Congress and presidential appointments, independent monetary policy, maintain stability. Right? So, fully nationalized system. All right. Black people, you don't want the nationalized part. You want it to be, because you can set up a same private bank within your own communities. It's just that you got to get Black people to invest in Black people. All right. Pre-integration, Black communities were excluded from mainstream banking and credit systems, right? So this is before 1960s and the 70s. Policies like redlining, restrictive mortgages, and employment discrimination limited access to federal loans, credit cards, and mainstream banks. Black people often had to rely on internal community systems for economic activity. Impact of exclusion forced Black communities to create self-sustaining financial networks. Credit and loans were often peer-to-peer or community-backed, not issued by outside bank. How Black communities function financially. Informal banking systems, rotating credit associations, ROSCO. Group of individuals who pour. So this is the partner systems, right? This is what Caribbean culture, a lot of Caribbean Blacks and Black Americans use, right? Group of individuals will pull. Excuse me, give me a moment. Right? Each member, a group of individuals will pull money together. Each member could borrow from the pool in rotation. Ensured everyone had access to temporary funds without going to a formal bank. Example, 10 members each contribute $100 a month, equals 1,000 collected. Month 1, member borrows $1,000. Month 2, member 2 borrows $1,000. Cycle repeats until all members benefited. Built trust and accountability within the community. Kept wealth circulating locally. Low default risk because social and reputational pressures enforce repayment, right? You can apply that system to anywhere. You can apply it to, I'm gonna spend money at this brother Donovan's grocery store 1 week. I'm gonna spend money at a Joseph barbershop this week. It can apply. That system can be applied to anything, right? Black communities ran grocery stores, laundries, barbershops, funeral homes, restaurants, and other essential services. Many transactions were cash based or barter based, avoiding dependence on external banks. Businesses were often multi generational, creating lasting community wealth. Advantages: ownership equals real wealth, not temporary credit. Money stayed in the community, strengthened local economy, low exposure to predatory lending or interest extraction. Now, people are going to say, see, the barter based system worked. Yes, but it was in a capitalist structure. Y'all talking about barter based systems in a hunter gatherer stage where the tribes were small, 30 to 50 people, right? You're talking about in the modern day where you have millions of people, right? So the barter-based system or the cash-based system was in a capitalist structure framework. So that's where it can work properly. You feel me? Advantages: ownership equals real wealth, not temporary credit. So I think I already said that, right? Let's continue. Mutual aid societies and fraternal orders. Organizations like the Prince Hall Masons, Knights of Pietas, and other fraternal societies provided funeral benefits, emergency loans, support for business ventures, functions as internal insurance and credit networks, built social capital and trust-based financial security, right? Lessons for today. Internal credit systems equal resilience. Communities that control their own credit, lending, and asset allocation can preserve and grow wealth internally. Asset ownership is greater than temporary credit. Pre-integration systems emphasize real wealth accumulation rather than leveraging outside credit. Social accountability equals financial stability. Peer-to-peer lending. Fraternal societies and community networks enforce repayment and minimize risk, right? Before integration, Black communities were like a self-contained integration irrigation system. Water money was a source, circulated and reused internally, inside the community. Every household and business benefited from that shared system. After integration, outside actors controlled the main pipes. Water credit flowed out, and the community lost control over distribution. Pre-integration, Black communities were financially independent, wealth retentive, and resilient because they controlled their own credit loans and assets. Integration into mainstream banking gave access to large amounts of credit, but reduced control, increased dependency, and exposed communities to systematic extraction. Partner Roscoe System explained. Group formation. A fixed number of people agreed to contribute to a set amount of money regularly, weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. Contribution. Each member contributes the same amount each period, $100 per week. Payout drew each period. One member received the total. Pool. Example, if 10 people contributed $100, the recipient gets $1,000. Rotation. The next period, a different member gets the pool, right? Completion. The cycle continues until all members have received a payout. Participation. Each contributes 100 per week, right? Continues until 10 members have received payout. Cycle repeats after completion. They can start a new round if desired. Members must continue contribution until the cycle is complete. The payout is essentially pre-funded by the group, not borrowed from a bank. No interest is paid externally. It's an internal lending credit mechanism, right? Everyone knows each other. Peer pressure and trust enforce repayment. Temporary access to larger funds. Early recipients to get credit of the full pool immediately, even though it's technically their own money being loaned by the group. Savings and credit combined. Everyone is forced to save regularly while having access to a lump sum when it's their turn. Community-centered. Money stays circulating inside the group. No banks involved, no external interest payments, right? In formal finance, this is called rotating savings and credit association. Key points. Credit, the early recipients effectively has a temporary loan from the group. Debt, they owe their continued contribution to ensure the cycle completes. Ownership, the money is collective and owned until fully distributed. Access to lump sum without a bank. Early recipients get immediate funds. Builds trust. It builds trust and discipline. Members are socially incentivized to contribute. Internal community wealth circulation. Keeps money inside the community. No external interest, unlike banks, no extra costs. It's paid outside the group. All right. So this is the thing, right? Like I said earlier, it works well for small groups, less effective for large-scale financing. So that's only the issue. But I would argue that's how a lot of Black Wall Street got created. So like you could probably do it in like small Black communities or Caribbean Black communities within that community, like say Flatbush or like say Merrick Boulevard over here, or maybe Long Island. You could probably do it as a small individual group and then build it like off that way. But like the issue now comes when it's in a large scale, and because there's no legal protection, there's no regulation there, and if a member stops contributing or can't contribute, it can collapse. Like say, I lose my job and I can't contribute $100 to that pot. You know what I'm saying? Shit like that. Shout out to DJ Ham. All right. So you already understand the analogy. You could take a pause on the video and read that there. Now you can start off this way to own assets in your community and owning a private banking system, and then eventually, have your own businesses and stuff, and then like this could be the base or foundation to grow, and then as you expand, you kind of transfer into something else. You feel me? Who knows? I'm just thinking of things. So this is what happened, right? Redlining, discriminatory lending, because what people don't understand is a lot of this affected Caribbean Blacks, especially out in Brooklyn, right? East New York, Brooklyn in the 80s and the 90s and the 60s, right? So this affected a lot of Caribbean Black communities too, with the redlining, right? Banking and federal agencies denied Black families mortgages or made them higher interest than whites. Neighborhoods were marked as risky, redlining, making it nearly impossible to get conventional loans. Right? Subprime predatory lending. Even after integration, banks targeted Black borrowers with high interest loans and balloon payments. Loans are often made for homes or businesses at rates far higher than white counterparts. And this is fucked up, right? Led to foreclosures, wealth loss, and cycle of debt. Racist terms or internal codes. Internally, some banks use the derogatory classification to mark Black clients as high risk. Terms like mud people, internally used to track communities seen as risk or untrustworthy. Call it risk accounts or other coded language to justify higher interest. These terms are not public. This is why a lot of people would use a white person to go get the loan for them, which is fucked up. That's fucked up. I remember, I think it was in, I forgot who it was, what movie I saw this in, but that presented this. But what I used to hear was that, a lot of Black people, especially even Caribbean Blacks, had to use a white face to go to the bank to ask for the loan. That's crazy. Temporary ownership trap. Credit allowed Black families to buy homes or businesses without immediate capital. By high interest rates, strict repayment terms, vulnerability to economic downturns. Result, assets often reverted to banks during crisis. 1970s to 2000s, recession, subprime crisis, right? So that's what happened. Consequences of integration. Communities no longer rely solely on internal savings and credit, which I don't know why we couldn't have done both. We could have still had our basic structure, our basic bank, still bought our own, and if necessary, do business with other communities, not rely on other communities. Like, what's business? If we borrow from you, you got to come buy something from us. You borrow from us. Or if you want to be in our community, you got to pay something to us. You got to come shop at our stores or eat at our restaurants, something. Some kind of business contract. But, integration. Shout out to MLK. Communities no longer rely solely on internal savings and credit. Wealth extraction, interest and fees flowed out of the community to white-owned banks. Debt cycles. Many families entered long-term debt without owning permanent assets outright. Erosions of trust systems. Partner money and fraternal lending systems became less central. Key insight. Integration opened access to larger credit but sacrificed control, leaving communities vulnerable to predatory lending and systematic extraction. All right. Marcus Garvey warned that as long as we remain in someone else's structure, we can never fully succeed. Our prosperity depends on their rules. their discretion, and their definition of risk. So this is one of the Caribbean Black culture, right? And you see this happening with FBA because we integrated with Black America and look at the result we're getting for it today. And even after our contribution to the creative space of Black American identity, they're just saying we participated and didn't contribute to it. So this is why in the next video I'll make, I'm encouraging Caribbean Blacks to be confident in delineating or separating and allow FBA to delineate too. And we're going to explain that. Operating inside a white-controlled financial system exposed Black communities to exploitation. Pre-integration, Black people controlled their own flows of money, credit, and assets, which Garvey argued was the path to real economic independence, which Garvey did. All right. So y'all can study the lessons for the day. Y'all can take a pause because I'm getting kind of tired of talking. Before integration, Black communities had internal control of money and credit, creating long-term wealth. Integration allowed access to larger sums of credit, but white-owned banks used systematic racism, predatory practices, and color classifications to extract wealth and trap communities in debt. Garvey's warning highlights that financial independence requires controlling your own system, not relying on the external structures built for someone else's profit. Right? This is what happened. Example: if white borrower might get 6% mortgage, a Black borrower in the same area might get 12 to 18%. Even if the family could technically afford the loan at first, compound interest made repayment exponentially harder. Banks impose lower credit limits on Black borrowers than on white borrowers. This limited amount of money Black families could access, even if they had income or collateral. Families couldn't borrow enough to invest, expand a business, or cover emergencies, forcing them to rely on multiple loans and increasing vulnerability. Woo. Loans often had shorter repayment windows, balloon payments or escalating interest, for example. 15-year loans structured like a 10-year payment, monthly payments that were barely manageable, late fees that could snowball quickly. Banks structured it so that missing even one payment could trigger default. Even when borrowers successfully paid part of their loans, interest drained most of the extra money. Strict repayment terms and limits increased the chance of late payments. Any financial hardship, job loss, illness, market downtime could push them into default. This is where Martin Luther King said, yo, I led my people into a burning building. Official term for failing to meet loan obligations. If you default, the banks could foreclose on your home and take back the business. All right. Right? Borrowers takes high interest loan to buy property. Payments are difficult due to strict terms, high interest and low limits. Small setbacks push borrowers into default. Property is repossessed, often sold back to the market or white buyers. Wealth and equity that was supposed to stay in the Black community flows out. Even if families were disciplined and paid consistently, the system was designed so that long-term asset communication was difficult, extremely difficult. This contributed to the generational wealth gaps, home loss, economic vulnerability that persisted into the 2000s and beyond. So this is important. On April 5th, 1933, by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, purpose to force U.S. citizens to hand over their privately held gold. None of this is not financial advice. This is me stating what's out there and what's on public record and information. So, it's part of history. Legal mechanism, it made holding of gold coins, balloons, bullion, and certificates illegal for individuals, companies, and institutions. Non-compliance penalty, up to 10 years in prison, a $10,000 fine, which was a huge amount in 1933, or both. This wasn't optional. It was a criminal offense to keep large amounts of gold. Citizens were ordered to turn in their gold to Federal Reserve banks or member banks by May 1st, 1933. In exchange, they received paper money. Federal Reserve notes valued $20.67 per ounce of gold. After that collection, the government revalued gold to 35% per ounce, effectively confiscating the public gold at a lower rate and devaluing the dollar. Citizens were forced to give up real tangible assets in exchange for paper IOUs, Federal Reserve notes, and the government then inflated the paper money supply while increasing the gold value it now owned. Wow. Roosevelt and his administration claimed this was necessary to combat the Great Depression, restore confidence in the banking system, and prevent hoarding that supposedly stalled the economy. In reality, it gave the Federal Reserve full control over the nation's money supply, transitioned America from a gold bucket-backed economy to a credit-based system. So, you know what I'm saying? Gold ownership ban. Citizens couldn't legally own gold again until 1974 under President Gerald Ford. Shift monetary power. The Federal Reserve gained full leverage to issue paper money now backed by gold. Economic control. The U.S. transitioned to a system where all money is debt-based. Every dollar is an IOU. And I already explained how you can turn that into permanent power, right? So we don't have to go to that again. Anyway, this is how Caribbean blacks, you got to know the system of America and how to use it to your advantage instead of complaining about Babylon this and Babylonian that, right? What is done is already done. It's how you're going to adapt to get a better future. This is how you do it, right? Back in the day, I used to be plagued or influenced by a publicly black space. And because of that, you don't learn how to use the system to your advantage. Now, understandable, because what happened during 2000 and 2008 is what I explained. So they had a reason to say what they're saying. But guess what? We're in 2025. 2025. All eyes is on America. And I'm pretty sure America right now does not want to damage its reputation by doing some racist crap. All right? So get to it. Detach your brain from what happened decades ago in the past and move forward to a better future. Anyway, this is Kish Yardy Views and Vlogs. Like, share, and subscribe to the video and, all that good stuff. Good stuff. And I'm out.